Raining here. Can you hear the rain in the background? It was uh, it was actually snowing a few hours ago. I'm in West Virginia, so I don't know where you are, but that's our weather. Anyway, I want to tell you the story. It's the Lady in Black and the XYZ headstone. I used to live in the Connecticut River Valley. It's one of the most beautiful places in all of Connecticut. It's in the middle of the state, and the bottom is of the valley is Old Saybrook. That's where the English landed, and they went inland from there. Uh, Along, if you were to go up the river, it goes northish, I guess, towards Hartford. It goes all the way actually to up to Vermont or New Hampshire. But anyway, if you go up Connecticut on the left-hand side, the western side, these wonderful little colonial towns that are several hundred years old. They're beautiful, beautiful, especially in the fall. If you get a chance, go. You can go to Old Essex, which is a colonial town. They've really not built much around it. And you can go to the Griswold Inn, which was open during the Revolution, have a really good meal, or you can take a boat up the Connecticut River and see that, or you can, it just circles back around. It's only about an hour ride. Or you can take an old-fashioned steam train. But where we're going to talk about today is the Fountain Hill Cemetery in Deep River, Connecticut, which is the town next to Old to Essex. In 1899, there were a lot of robberies at one time in this country, bank robberies and so forth. So in 1899, the police learned that there was a plan in the works to rob the very wealthy Deep River savings banks. They had around 1.3 million in deposits in 1890. That was a lot of money for a dinky little town like that. It was a village, actually. I think today it is officially a town, but when I lived there, it was the village of Deep River. And it was flush with prosperity because of the ivory trade. So the boats would come out of Africa and they'd go up the Connecticut River and drop off these tusks and they'd take them over to the factory, which is still there. It's an apartment house today. And they turned the ivory into wonderful, beautiful things, but thank God they've stopped the ivory trade, so it's unnecessary. Anyway, the police told the managers, look, they're going to rob you, so they hired this guy, a watchman, a professional watchman, Harry D. Taylor. Harry was a local celebrity because he was guarding a warehouse once, and some guy broke in at midnight and used a chair to knock him out with. So the bank was in good hands. On December 13th, 1899, between about 1:30 in the morning, four guys attempted to break in. It was a dog belonging to a neighbor, William B. Stevens. Stevens' family is still there. And it started to bark, and it alerted Taylor, who looked out the bank's window whenever he heard the dog bark, and he saw these four guys walking in single file towards the bank, and he watched one of them get up on a stool or something, and he peeped into the window of the bank to see what was going on. The man stood 5 feet 4 inches tall. I don't know why they picked such a short guy to go up that high in a window. He was wearing a dark suit, white collar, white shirt, dark colored necktie. He was well dressed apparently. Black derby hat, dark brown but thin overcoat, and he wore a neatly trimmed mustache. He was bald, they found out later when the hat came off. Harry Taylor stepped into the middle of the bank. I don't know if he gave a warning or not, but this guy was trying to get into the window at that point. And Harry fired off his Winchester. It was a six-shot riot gun, a shotgun. And then he threw himself into a dark corner in case the burglars fired back, which they sometimes did. You know, these things could be violent. So after 10 minutes, he looked out the window and he saw this dead guy. And here's how the newspapers put it. Listen to how gory this is. The watchman shot and killed one burglar, blowing off the top of his head. He lay as he had fallen, with his arms as though thrown up and one knee slightly drawn up. Blood and brains, jeez, were oozing from a terrible wound on the left side of the head, the eye being completely gouged out, and there being several bullet holes in the forehead. By bullet holes, they mean like a buckshot. They were little. This gun fired like little missiles, sort of tiny bullets. And under him, they found his loaded revolver, and in his pocket, a number of loose cartridges where he could reach them instantly. The three other burglars ran for it. They escaped. There's two reports, either by boat up the Connecticut River, or they had a team of horses and rode out of town. The state police is based on the high grade of the burglary tools found in the body, thought they were a professional team. The body was taken to a funeral home. They placed him on display the next day to see if anybody could recognize this guy. A medical examiner came in and he said the man may have been a machinist. That was a common trade in Connecticut in those days, or a railroad brakeman, which turned out to be right because his hands were calloused and oil and grime stains under his fingernails. A Pinkerton detective was brought in. I don't know by who, maybe by the state of Connecticut. There was no really national detective agency in those, government detective agency in those days. The Secret Service and the Marshals, but they were really centered on different things, not homicides and bank robberies. The FBI would take that over eventually. So the Pinkerton man, he examined the body and he found the name Rogers written on the back of the man's shirt, something that had gone unnoticed by the medical examiner. He went over the contents of the man's pocket. He found a copy of Springfield, Massachusetts newspaper, Springfield Republican newspaper, a dollar bill, 2 dimes, a Waltham silver dollar with gold-plated chains, 6 Morse twist steel drills, a safety fuse, dynamite cartridge, soap preparations for tapping the fuse into the bond they were going to use. And most importantly, they found the money receipt order with the number 1743 from Springfield, Mass. Post Office dated December 4, 1899, made out to T.J. Farley, 144 Broadway in Albany. So the detective traveled up to Albany, and he found this guy, T.J. Farley. He was a bartender in what the newspapers called a crook's resort in Albany. I did some research on this guy. It's pretty interesting. He had one of the first Studebaker outlets in western New York. He was a horse racing guy. He had 16 horses that he raced. He became ill, had to sell them. He held elective office for a short time. Anyway, Farley said that the dead man matched the description of his friend F.B. King. King, which is again the name found on the shirt, had been a brakeman on the Boston and Albany railroads, which did go through Connecticut. What Farley withheld was the fact that he also worked as a brakeman occasionally, and he damn well knew this guy, and he knew him very well, actually. The Albany police, they knew this F.E. King. By the way, I'm not wrong. So it keeps coming in on the papers as either F.E. or F.B. I can't get it straight. He's mentioned in the papers as F.E. and F.B. There was an F.B. in King in Albany. I found him. I just don't know if it's the right guy. Anyway, they knew King as a suspicious character, that's their quote, and fingered him as one of the men who robbed a brewery in Amsterdam, New York in the fall of 1899. I couldn't find anything out about that robbery. Their information matched Thomas Farley's information that King had worked as a brakeman in Boston and Albany Railroad, and he stayed in the Eastern Hotel of downtown Albany. They said that he had left Albany 2 weeks before the robbery happened. They didn't know where he went, but he borrowed money from Thomas Farley, who the police described as King's friend. The man back in Connecticut, the body, is still unidentified. So the town, New England has its ways. They're flinty, to say the least. And so they buried him, which surprised me. Usually, anyway, they buried him in a grave, and they marked it XYZ. Nobody knows for certain. They didn't know the guy's name. They had a burial. I'm shocked they gave him a headstone, but they put out XYZ and left it there. To this day, no one really knows who the burglar was. However, and I heard this legend when I was a teenager living there. And again, this is probably mostly legend, although I did find a newspaper account of it. Every year, this woman who was dressed completely in black and she wore a veil on her face so they couldn't tell who she was, came to the grave until the mid-40s, and then she no longer returned. According to legend, she took the train into town. The train doesn't go there anymore, and then took the train back to Hartford. No one spoke to her. No one knew who she was. So, interesting.